Everybody, I'm Pete Christensen,
And I'm Coffee Brown.
and welcome to episode 9 of
Don't Die Dumb.
Today we're going to start with the topic of endangered species. The current administration wants to get rid of the Endangered Species Act, which would put a lot of animals, insects, and even fish in danger. I'm against this, and I'll give an example of why. When the mad cow disease was raging in Europe and eventually to Canada and the Pacific Northwest, we had been warned about it years earlier by headhunters who said that only the very old and the warriors could eat human flesh because they would lose control, fall over, they would laugh hysterically all the time at nothing, and eventually die. And that's called
Jakob-Creutzfeldt disease.
Okay.
It's the general class is called prions, which means protein fragments that are actually what carry the code from one generation to the next. Rather than DNA, the DNA makes RNA, makes protein. The protein is what is left in the tissue, and the protein then makes a copy RNA, which makes DNA, which causes the disease. So it works a little differently than a virus, but generically similar.
Mm-hmm. Now, it was starting to rage through Europe when they found it. It was already in, as I said, Canada and America. And they were looking desperately for a cow that would have some type of anti-effect with it to stop it. They found it in Vietnam because of our use of Agent Orange and the bombs going from both sides. We had decimated this one type of cattle to just 30 of them in the world. Now, if we had killed them off, they'd been extinct, there'd be no cure for this. It would have raged through the world. Who knows how many millions of people it could have killed. And I use that as an example of why it's important to keep, even if you hate animals, other than they taste good, even if you hate them, you still want them here. We don't know the benefits of animals yet at all, I don't think.
Well, from the standpoint of just treating animals as products for our use, recall that when we domesticate animals, they become more and more homogeneous. They become more and more like each other. We all want the cow that gives the most milk or the most meat, or we all want the horse that can run the fastest or pull a sled. We reduce their genetic diversity and genetic adaptability versus the wild in general. And so they become more and more dependent on us, which we kind of want in some ways. But the problem is that when a disease comes along that can kill them, it can kill all of them. An example in the plant world would be the Irish potato famine. But this kind of thing happens a lot. In the U.S., we have a lot of monocultures. We have beef cows, dairy cows, and corn account for the bulk of U.S. crops. If we had a blight, and it could be a militarily engineered, like it could be an intentional virus that wiped out corn of the type that we grow, we would be facing hunger issues that same year, because one type of corn accounts for more than half of all of the calories that we consume in the U.S., one way or another, directly or indirectly.
Now, it's true that seed companies have got it written in the law now that when a farmer has seeds, he's got to get rid of whatever he doesn't plant at the end of the year. They have to buy them annually, which doesn't make us terribly susceptible.
Exactly. These are patented. It is illegal to try to hold seed corn for the next harvest or try to, have your own seed corn. Mm-hmm. And moreover, some of them won't grow on their own. As you know, a lot of the plants that you buy at the supermarket, you can plant seeds from them, but they won't grow anything. Or something like apples, you can plant and you might get a tree, but it won't produce apples similar to the one that you planted. Apple genetics is super complex.
Now, I don't want to get off the subject too much, but when I drove to several of the reservations, I saw sand dunes, and they were actually growing corn in sand dunes because they've mastered what they call dry farming. And the Israeli government sent for 14 Native American agriculturists to show them how to do that because it would be so profitable and productive in a desert land like Israel has. Now, we'll get off this topic a little bit, but when we're talking about endangered species, everything is intertwined. We've heard this for years and years, and people don't believe it. People say, well, we got along fine when the dinosaurs were gone.
Well, yes and no. So tamoxifen was a real game changer for breast cancer. Tamoxifen was the turning point from when breast cancer was a death sentence to when we began to have expectations of survival. Now 90% of women with breast cancer can be cured, which I think is fantastic because it was the other way around when I started in medicine. Tamoxifen comes from the bark of the yew tree. Who would have guessed that? I would have, and here's why. Because nature reuses molecules over and over. Soybeans have female hormones in them, estrogen, and the reason is not that they have any female organs, soybeans don't grow boobs, but because they solve other problems in other species. Every living creature has to solve the same problems we do: efficient use of energy, fighting off cancers, stabilizing genetics for the next generation, and so forth. And they're all stabilizing them in different ways. The yew tree created a molecule that could fight off mutations better than our other drugs were doing at the time that cause cancer. And that's because trees get cancer too. You've seen tumors on trees before, you just didn't notice them. So every time a species goes extinct, all of the genetic solutions that species has developed to fight various diseases, to deal with drought, to deal with flooding, whatever that species has had to deal with, all of those genes are gone. We burn a Library of Alexandria every time we lose a species. Also, I hear people talk all the time about how much they love their children. And I have to question that if you're not going to leave them the diversity of species that we have been inspired by. And if you're not going to leave them a survivable climate, then what do you think it means to say you love your children if you take away all of their legacy?
Well, now, people will tell you that the polar bear is going extinct, could go extinct. The rhinoceros in many forms, I think there's only one black rhino, northern black rhino left in the world. These things are going extinct. But it doesn't matter because we have them in zoos, so we'll always have them. And I'm not buying that because captive breeding programs are so unbelievably difficult.
No, and way no. Recall that the last passenger pigeon died in the late 1930s, for example. It lived long enough to be photographed, but you can't really keep a species alive in the zoo. For one thing, we don't call them extinct if we still have members in the zoo. We can say extinct in the wild. But the other is that they lose all their genetic diversity, and therefore their adaptability. So diversity has become a politicized word, but to a biologist, diversity means adaptability. So look at dogs. So domesticated dogs. There are big fat ones with lots of hair. They'll do great if we go into an ice age. There are little skinny ones with no hair. They'll do great if we go into a hot patch, which is where we're headed. There's big dogs. They'll do great if there's big prey out there. And there's little dogs. They'll do great if the world is inhabited by mice and rats. Because dogs have so much diversity, they will almost certainly survive whatever comes next. But the less diversity that we have, the less our biological survival potential. And it's the same when we talk about philosophy and concepts and worldviews. When we have multiple different worldviews, we can adapt to multiple different geopolitical and physical environmental changes. But when we all have the same worldview, it's only adapted to one world. And when that world changes, we die out.
Now, right now, I believe in Minnesota and Wisconsin, 6 senators have voted to start a wolf hunting season. There are 1,200 wolves in Wisconsin, and they are overrun with deer. I can tell you several friends of mine have 30 to 40 deer every night that come by their house. The idea of sport hunting, if you can't eat it, why kill it?
Pete, you just don't understand. Our Viking ancestors, guys who literally passed around a bowl that they spit and blew snot into before the next guy drank from it and then spit and blew snot into it, guys who created Limburger cheese by stomping on curdled milk with their bare feet, those guys killed wolves. And I want to kill a wolf too because I want to feel like a Viking. I want to kill a wolf. I want to kill a wolf. Eric the Red-Handed killed a wolf. Why can't I kill a wolf?
Understand this.
I'd be like a Viking.
No.
And I only eat meat. Nothing but meat. Nothing but meat is good enough for me. Because look at these teeth. Teeth of a carnivore, right?
Understand this. I don't have anything against hunting. Trophy hunting's another story. But if you're going to eat that food that you shoot, and it's not endangered, and you only take what you need, I get it. The money you buy the proper licenses, the money you pay for that
Oh, so you're saying it's
license-
okay to hunt if you hunt responsibly?
Yeah.
I don't want to be responsible.
No, they
I'm
don't.
a man-child. My entire goal in life is to not be responsible or accountable for anybody else's morality or conventions or norms. I want to break every rule there is, just like the president.
Now, there are those people who say, well, with big game hunting, you go to Africa and shoot an elephant, that their fees are so high that helps preserve the elephants. I don't buy it. It does help some of the residents, but no. The damage you do to the species, what happens when you kill an elephant, because they take the biggest, they can't pass on those genes, correct?
Right.
Now-
Trophy hunters go after the best specimen, whereas natural predators go after the weak and the sick.
Now, we're seeing that some elephants are now coming of age with no tusk. I don't know how this works, but probably because the tuskers have all been killed.
Well, the tuskers don't get to reproduce as much because they're the first ones killed by poachers.
Yeah.
I've often thought that one of the best ways to protect elephants would be to go and remove their tusks when they're calves, so when they grow up, they have no ivory.
Well, what they're doing now with rhinoceros, I don't know if they're doing it with other animals, but with rhinoceros, their horn is actually made out of hair. They inject it with dye, so you can never sell it.
Okay, that seems like a good strategy.
Maybe
that
that'll help.
removing the horn.
Yeah.
But this whole notion that, well, a horn is sort of like this curved, rigid thing, so I bet it's got special phallic properties. I mean, come on, we're in the 21st century. Really? We're still thinking like that? And yes, more than half the world still thinks like that.
Well, we were broadcasting to Radio Marti, Radio Free Europe, things of that nature, telling people that these had no aphrodisiac products, but that's all been closed down now. So we don't have a voice in those nations. And by the way, the nations where we cut off aid, they're now getting aid to China, so who do you think they're going to be loyal to? But I'm getting off the subject here. They bred, now I want to take this in a little bit of a different direction, if I may. People will say, well, why do we have to preserve the species? We brought back Dolly the sheep. We can bring them all back.
Well, so first of all, they had to clone a bunch of sheep to get one Dolly, and Dolly was not a particularly healthy sheep. The reasons for that have been somewhat debated, but it appears that Dolly didn't get the telomeres of a young sheep. This is a part on the end of the chromosome, and telomeres sort of flake off over time, and that's the countdown to when we check out of the world. So our body knows how old we are by how many telomeres we have, and there are certain checkpoints where your body says, oh, time for you to get older. And these occur at actually predictable stages in life. 40, 60, and 80 are the classic ones that we know about right now. So the other thing is that if we were to bring an extinct species back, like cloning it from its DNA, as we might do with the dodo, for example, we would get very limited genetic diversity. We wouldn't get the whole species. It's as if we brought the entire human race back from my genes, which would be a vastly superior race, I think we can all agree. But it would all be one person, and all but me would be redundant. It's our differences that make us valuable to each other, and it's differences within a species that make it viable as the environment changes. Finally,
Go ahead. Finally, yes.
A lot of this gets referenced back to a company called Mammoth, which is working on bringing back the woolly mammoth and the dire wolf. And they have a kind of semi-approximation of the dire wolf. What they did was they reconstructed what DNA they could find from dire wolf tissue, because they died out recently enough that some of that is preserved in the frozen tundras and so forth. So we have samples of dire wolf DNA, but not enough to make a whole dire wolf. And so they combined that with DNA from modern wolves, and they chose DNA that they thought would approximate the dire wolves, and they sorted for size. And so what they wound up with was a great big white wolf that has some anarchistic attributes, but it is actually not a dire wolf. It's more like if we copied a dire wolf from a drawing and we got something that resembled a dire wolf, but it's not actually the same as a dire wolf. And as you pointed out to me earlier, well, tell me about the ligers.
Well, they have bred tigers and lions. They get this immense animal, the biggest feline in the world. And what they found out was it doesn't know how to hunt. They'll put it in with chickens or some prey animal, and it just sits there. It does not have any inclination to hunt at all. So it can't survive in the wild.
Yeah, lions live in prides, and the women do most of the hunting, even though that the male lion gets first pick, typically because he's bigger and stronger. Tigers, on the other hand, are solo animals. So they wound up with an animal that would run up and punch an animal and then stand there and wait for its wives to come up and prepare it.
Yeah, okay.
So they all starve to death.
Now, there was a Bureau of Land Management, or I believe it was, in Oregon. And he started to only let, when they had the horses they were bringing, the wild horses, he would only let the white horses breed with the other white horses. Black horse with black, brown with brown, as an experiment. Now, understand what he did, though.
All right.
He kept doing this, and after a while, the brown horses had zebra stripes on their hinds. What he did was, and this was years ago, he brought back a horse that had been extinct for over 100 years. Now, and because it had gone extinct within a century, some of its DNA was in these other hunters, in these other horses. Now, in the Midwest, and I know somewhere on the East Coast they're doing this too, farmers are bringing back different pigs, different sheep that were thought to be bred out of existence because they didn't have all the qualities we want. And apparently it's working.
So, I shouldn't overstate the case. I'm broadly in favor of trying to reconstruct some of these extinct species, to study them, and sometimes they can fill important ecologic niches. Some of them are keystone species. I just don't think that people should regard that as being as good as not getting rid of them in the first place. I mean, if I had a really nice coffee cup and I dropped it, I might glue it back together, and that might be better than throwing it away, but it wouldn't be as good as not dropping it.
All right, so we were speaking off camera earlier. A lot of these species that we've brought back are infertile. Is that correct?
I don't know about the fertility of the mammoth experiments, and those are the ones I know about that we brought back. But when we hybridize species like ligers, they tend to be infertile. In fact, the infertility of the offspring is a measure of a word we humans use incorrectly, race. So when two species are close enough that they can reproduce, but not close enough to have the same fertility as within a species, that's what the word race means. It does not apply to any two human groups at all.
Now, when they crossed donkeys, not burros, but donkeys with horses, they got the mule. And for 100 years, it was feral. It was not feral, it was sterile. And it was Will Ferrell, who could be sterile too, I don't know. But anyhow, it was sterile. But then, I don't know how, but it became fertile again. They started reproducing in the 70s, I believe. So does that give us hope?
It depends on what you want hope for. Does it give us hope that we could repopulate some sort of creature to replace the ones we lost? Yes, but it wouldn't be anywhere near as well adapted to a natural environment. And it might or might not be well adapted to a domesticated environment.
Now, I believe in, as sad as it may be, some animal experimentation. I'm strictly against vivisectionism, where they do these horrible experiments on animals and cause them pain uselessly. There was a scientist that wanted to study how to keep people from drowning after they drowned. And he wanted to drown 150 monkeys. And he was stopped. The community stopped him. PETA, whether you agree with them or not, PETA went into Scottsdale, Arizona, where they were going to have a vivisectionist animal experimentation. And all they do is drop off DVDs in people's mailboxes they mailed them to them, of what that entailed. And the entire community showed up. They were against it. If you saw the cruelty and pain we caused to different apes and monkeys, you would never agree to this. It is so inhumane. If you wouldn't do it to a human, why would you do it to an animal? Now we don't have to eat meat to survive, but most people consider it a part of daily life.
So Peter Singer would argue that when we give ourselves permission to be cruel to any sentient species, anything that can suffer, then we give ourselves permission to be cruel to each other. We just declare the other, and it's okay to do anything we want to them. Witness ICE, witness the concentration camps of World War II, witness Vlad the Impaler. Humans have always given themselves permission to do absolutely god-awful things to each other, and usually you can trace that back to giving permission to themselves to do god-awful things to other creatures as well. God, if there is one, made all of us, but let's assume for a moment that humans are special. We really are special. We're just the best thing.
Oh, yeah.
We're the toast of the town. We're the best species on the whole planet. I might make a case that in our body, our brain is the most special organ. It's where we live. It's where we store memories. It's where our personality forms. But if the brain cells grow without respect to the needs of the rest of the body, it's brain cancer and we die horribly. Okay? And if we don't respect the needs of the rest of the ecosystem that we're part of, we will die horribly. And that will probably be this century. It turns out that we thought we might die from radiation poisoning. We thought we might freeze to death from a nuclear winter. We thought plague might get us. But it's looking like we're going to cook. And also that plague will still get us because warm climates create a lot more diseases. That's why tropical diseases are such a big deal. Malaria is already working its way up into the southern United States, and malaria will just cross right up into the continent as the equatorial band of sweltering heat widens.
Man is not egocentric, but powerful men and women are. That's why for years we had to have the sun revolving around Earth. All the planets had to revolve around the Earth. And it's taken to such an extreme, we have to have dolphins save tuna. Oh wait, because the dolphin's more likable than the tuna? We can't eat horses. They do in France, but we can't eat them here because the horse is okay, but the cow, you slaughter them, it's all right.
I mean, it's a start, but trying to save the cute animals kind of misses the point. Ecosystems are more complex than that. For example, it wasn't at all intuitive to me that a keystone species for the California coast is the otter. I didn't think of otters as particularly central or dominant species, but the whole ecosystem starts to fall apart if there aren't enough otters. Wolves are a keystone species over much of the central part of the country, and humans are not a good replacement. Wolves strengthen the species they hunt. We weaken the species we hunt.
I think that the inability of man to see all things as valuable is an odd thing that we have to deal with, in the way of knowing that maybe we're not number one, maybe we're all interdependent, but that's not taught in schools.
We don't just cheat other species, we cheat ourselves as well. We live in a world full of amazing vistas. We have wetlands where there's, plants that can catch insects. We live in a world where there's elephants that use their nose like an arm. We live in a world where there's bears. And we just go, oh yeah, but we're used to that. It's not special. It is special. It's our inability to appreciate the world that makes us dissatisfied with it. It's freaking full of miracles everywhere we look, but we're jaded to them, and we take pride in being jaded to them. And so this sunset that you see behind us is gorgeous. But when is the last time you remember to go outside and watch the sunset and say, holy crap, that's beautiful? We have everything we need except for what we want most, which is more. Just the word more, never mind what, just more. We just want more of everything and anything that we can get. So, Ronald Reagan looked at these sequoias, the tallest trees in the world. He's standing, cranking his neck upward to look high up into the sky at the tallest trees in the world, and his comment was, so much wasted lumber. That's all he could think that it was. That was like,
the famous George Will quote, the beauty is not in a tree, but in the luxurious cabinet you can make out of it.
That's so George Will.
Yeah.
And so when we think the entire world would be great if it were just an entirely different world, it's kind of like when I hear patriots say they love America, except for the people that aren't white. But I love the rest of America. Well, not the women, but I love the rest of, not the gay people, but I do love the rest of, not those weird trans people, but I do love the rest of, not the Jewish people, but the whole rest of the country I absolutely love, except for the Democrats. And also those Lutherans, not too sure about them. And what is up with those Quakers? But I love the whole country. Well, what I mostly love is a flag and some borders, especially if those borders enclosed, for example, Greenland. Well, that'd be just great, So what they finish saying is, I love this country if only it were an entirely different country, run by a king for white Christian males. Then I would love this country. But the whole constitutional democracy thing, that's got to go so I can continue loving my country.
One of my first jobs in broadcasting, I had a talk radio show. And an old man in his 80s asked if he could come on as a guest. I said, yeah, what do you want to talk about? And he said, ecology. I said, okay. So he came on with this idea that was completely foreign to me, save the swamps. And from being a young kid raised on a farm, trudging through swampland, I didn't get it. I didn't like it. It was stupid. Well, let me have to say. That became the international organization, Wetlands for Wildlife. He started it in his 80s. Recently, a 16-year-old boy in Greece started a program from which he figured out that most of the plastic getting into the ocean is coming from rivers. Block off the mouth of the river and let the water flow through, but collect the plastics. That was 4 years ago. It's now an international organization. We can do tremendous things, and don't think you're too old if you're 80 and you want to try something. And by the way, in New Mexico, there's the Sierra Club, the Environmental Justice Caucus, and New Mexico Wild. They're all great organizations. I've been working with all three of them, and guess what? None of them work together. I'm going to try and make that happen, but I'm shocked that they didn't think, and their goals are all a little bit different, so I can see why they want to forge forward in a very focused manner. But I also think they could learn from each other. Hopefully we can get that done. But getting back to endangered species, well, who benefits from getting rid of this?
In the very, very short term, some guys benefit because they just like killing stuff. They think that's how they know they're a man.
But
and
also,
some people get trophies, taxidermists.
Industrials will now be able to...
We take over the land because there's nothing left to protect, right?
Yeah.
We were all born into a world that has forests and deserts and oceans and streams. We were born into a world that has rhinoceros and elephant and octopus and whales. And we clearly have no intention of leaving that to our children. Like, well, this is just for me. We're sort of like British landowners who when they come into their inheritance, they just gamble it all away and leave nothing for their children. And this is why I keep questioning the whole concept of what people think it means when they say they love their children. I love them, but I'm not leaving them anything. I had to scrabble for everything I had. I had nothing to defend myself against bears with, except for a high-power rifle with a telescopic scope and a Jeep and 4 friends and some dogs and a hand grenade.
When I talk to people about global warming, or as a Republican, George Bush deemed it climate change, they say, yeah, that's all a hoax. What if it is? So what?
It's a really convincing hoax, given that all of us have been complaining about hotter years every single year for the last 20 years.
But even if it is a hoax,
a convincing one.
Don't you want to have clean air and clean water for your children and grandchildren?
No! What if we clean up the air and clean up the water and protect the species and keep our forests and make the world beautiful and we can breathe without asthma and it's all for nothing?
Excellent point, my friend. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Pete Christensen.
I'm Coffee Brown.
And remember,
don't die dumb.